In this next video, we're going to be looking at another one of the flavors of Agile, and this time we're going to be looking at something that's called Lean. So Lean is something that we aren't going to be covering specifically inside of this module in depth. However, it's one of the more common flavors of Agile that you might come across, and a lot of the features inside of it will help you in different parts of your software development lives. So a little bit about Lean first. It actually originated back in the manufacturing industry and I think it was Toyota that actually came up with it back in the 1940s. And it was designed then to try and deliver value to the business by the reduction of waste. The idea is that anything that we are wasting products, time and money is something that is not adding value to the business. It moved on and kind of Toyota fully embraced this throughout their development life cycle. And in the early noughties, it was started to become a process that was more common inside of software development as well. They really work alongside other principles. So they work alongside other flavors of Agile such as XP and Scrum. And they focus on this collaboration between developers, management, and project stakeholders. And the quote here at the bottom, by focusing on value, flow, and people, you get better quality, lower costs, and faster delivery. So what we're doing again is we're focusing on that value that we can give to the customer. We're focusing on the flow of information and how we can make sure that that information is flowing in the best way possible. And again, people over processes. So moving on, there are different kinds of waste that can exist inside of projects. And Lean really uses something that's called a value stream map in order to figure out what these different kinds of waste are and how they apply to different projects and how we can remove them. The first of these is transport, and that's really defined as the unnecessary movement and handling of goods and people, okay? With this, we need to think about context switching as well. Okay, anytime that we're switching context, so switching between different projects, it can lead to unproductivity and ultimately will end up in slowing things down. So we want to try and reduce that as much as possible. The next one is inventory. So in terms of the manufacturing side of Lean, this would be defined as the storage of parts that are excess or awaiting consumption. Okay. In terms of software development, think about this as code that has been written but not yet implemented in a working version of the code. Okay. There's no point in holding on to code unless it's actually going to be put into a development version of your software that is going out to the client, because it could become obsolete. Someone else might write something else which would interfere with the way that you're doing things and it might not work. The next one is motion. So unnecessary motion of employees, artifacts, or equipment. Okay. With this, think about documentation. If you are moving documents between different people, so from an analyst to a developer to a tester, you aren't really helping people. If you had people in the same room, they would be able to communicate more tacitly. They'd be able to actually talk to each other and figure out how they are going to be working together as a team, as opposed to this motion of documents. The next type of waste is waiting. So if we're waiting for a process to produce something so that it can be consumed by the next thing, what we're doing is we're wasting time. You don't want people to be waiting about doing nothing, because that is ultimately a waste of time and money. Next one is overproduction. So the development of items that are not demanded by the users. In software development, we call this gold plating. So things that the developer themselves feels that might be required in the future, but not really needed now. A brilliant example of gold plating is an example from a bank system. A software company was brought in to redevelop a bank's login system, and the system that the bank previously had, kind of the user logs in, they wait 10 seconds, and then they're redirected to their bank accounts. Software development company go away, figure out that they can reduce this 10-second wait time to be 0 seconds, come back and show it to the bank and say, look, we're doing this for you, no charge. And the bank say, yeah, but we didn't want that, because that 10 seconds that someone's waiting about, that's 10 seconds they're spending looking at our adverts. So the gold plating that the developers had put in actually backfired in that place. So unless that you're being asked to do something by the client, you probably shouldn't be doing it, okay? It might be harmless in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to lead to unnecessary technical debt in the project. On the other side of things, you don't want to be over processing things as well, okay? We want to make sure that if we do have any documents that we're creating, we're keeping them short, simple, and high level to make sure that if we are going to be doing any analysis, we're keeping it as simple as possible. And then the final kind of waste is defects. So we want to make sure that we don't have any defects in our code or in our documentation. Okay. With this, if you are creating documentation, make sure it's up to date. Anyone that's played around with APIs will know how important it is to have up-to-date documentation so that you know exactly what your different routes are that you're actually playing with. So how do we actually get rid of this waste? Lean uses something that's called the 5S technique. And this is really used to produce a workplace that doesn't have any waste, it's organized, it's clean, efficient, and it's effective. First thing that we do is we try and sort things. If something is not needed in the workplace, we remove it. You don't want to have 1 million libraries installed in your web project if you're only going to be using 2 or 3 of them. Next, make sure that everything is set in the correct order. Have a look through your product backlog. Is there any dependencies that mean that some tasks have to be carried out before other tasks? If there is, make notes for that and make sure that you are actually carrying these out whenever you are creating any backlog items. Next, you want to make sure that you're periodically inspecting the workplace and keeping it clean. You want to shine. With this, think again about refactoring of your code. Make sure that your code is always of the highest possible standard and always look for ways that you can improve it. You want to standardize. You want to follow standard practices and processes in the workplace. Make sure that you're following very similar code practices between all of the people in your team. By doing this, you're ensuring that you're all working to the same standard, and if someone was to move away to a different team and someone new comes in, they would have a very good understanding and would be able to get up to speed a lot more quickly. Then finally, sustain. Maintain order, discipline, and good working conditions. Okay, so again, make sure that what you're doing is sustainable, that it's something that you'll be able to continue doing at the same pace for a long period of time, and it's not something that will lead to burnout. So there's lots of different things inside of Lean that we're trying to do. We are trying to eliminate waste. There's lots of different ways that we can do this. We can do things like remove all of the documentation that the customers aren't going to need. We can remove unnecessary and complex features inside of our code. We can remove any code that isn't actually being used at all. And if there's any blockers in place, so if you are working in an industry that requires you to sign off a certain aspect before it's been completed, ask, why does that sign off have to happen? Is that creating an unnecessary waste of time in waiting for that to happen so that you have to do that context switch between tasks before you can go on and do things? Have a think about meetings as well. Are meetings ineffective? Are you getting anything from a meeting? Okay, if you're turning up to a meeting without an agenda that doesn't have any expected outcomes, that's got bad timekeeping, is it really the best use of your time? Could you be spending your time doing better things? One of the best ways to make sure that you're actually getting something out of a meeting is to make sure that the first question that's asked and answered by the chair of the meeting is, what is the purpose of this meeting? What do we want to achieve in this meeting that we wouldn't have been able to do by other means? And also we want to try and remove any management overhead, okay? You don't want to have this kind of micromanagement structure of people saying you should be doing things this way. Again, Agile is all about people over processes. We want to empower people to be the ones that are responsible for actually doing things in teams. We also want to try and amplify learning inside of a lean process environment, okay? We're always trying to figure out new ways that we can reduce waste. It's not going to be an activity that happens once. It's going to be a continuous activity that we'll work on again and again. Okay, we don't want to approach this as something that we think that we'll get right the first time that we do it. We want to look at it as something that we'll be getting wrong. Remember, fail fast, fail often. Make sure that you're following these processes. We also want to try and decide things as late as possible. If you decide something and start working on it, there's a chance that someone will tell you, we could do this another way. If you leave this until the last minute possible and follow just-in-time planning, requirements are less likely to change. Okay, and with that, there's very, very little chance that you will have to then create additional materials. Think about the way that things have been going over the last little while, and think about when different situations have changed and you've been told, oh, we're doing things one way, but the next day you've been told, actually, we're going to be doing things something completely different. If things are left until the last minute possible, using this just-in-time approach, you will save yourself time, energy, and ultimately reduce your stress levels. We also want to try and defer commitment and decision making until the last minute possible as well. If you need to make a decision, make sure you know when that decision has to be made by. And that way, you'll be able to better determine when you can make it. Leave it to the last minute, and that gives yourself as much thinking time as possible. This steers away from all this premature decision making, and it makes sure that you're limiting the amount of wasted time in making a decision and then having to make another decision because requirements have changed at a later date. We also, however, want to make sure that we are delivering things as fast as possible. So even though we are leaving things to the last second, we are making sure that that last second happens a very, very large number of times. So we're delivering things once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, to make sure that the client is always seeing what we're doing, okay? What we're trying to do here is we're following a pull-based delivery system. With this, the client is always telling us what we want, and we are then giving it to them, okay? The main difference between Lean and Scrum here is that the team isn't going to be committing to a series of stories at the start. We don't have a sprint backlog per se anytime that we're carrying out Lean. What we do instead is we look at our overall kind of product backlog and we pick the ones that are interesting based on what our customer on site is saying or what on the development team are thinking that is important at that point in time. And the development team would have an idea about what's important because we're trying to empower them. We're trying to empower the team and empower the people inside it. Again, people over processes. And Lean fully embraces this. Lean is a people-centric philosophy. People are central to the work that we're doing. And again, you're the best person to determine the way that you should be doing a task. And if you've managed to get an energized and motivated bunch of people that you're working with, then that's half of the hard work done because you've created a team and an environment where people want to get the work done. And in these situations, leaders don't really have a responsibility to actually manage teams of people. They set the overall direction that we're going in, but the mode of transport is left to you as individuals. Okay, the leaders are more there as a servant leadership type role. Again, these are the people that are going to be making sure to remove the blockers of anything that's in your way. Okay, we also want to try and build in integrity in all of the things that we're doing inside of Lean. Okay, we want to make sure that we have two different types: perceived integrity and conceptual integrity. When we're talking about perceived integrity, what we're really looking at is how the customer experiences the system and balances the different qualities of that system. If the customer can see that the system that you have created is a high level of integrity, a high quality, they're going to like it. They're going to see that level of return on investment in what you've created. But we also want to look at this on a deeper level inside of the program itself, looking at the conceptual integrity of how all of these different aspects of the program talk to each other. How are they coupled to each other, and how does that help you as a development team to actually maintain the product in the long term? Okay, and then finally, we really want to try and optimize the whole of the process. And this includes the software, the people inside it, and the way that those people work. It doesn't just have to apply to an individual level of an organization. It can apply to every single part of that organization that you as a team work with. If you think that something could be improved, it's part of your responsibility as a Lean team to be the ones that say, actually, we could be doing this a better way. We could get rid of this waste and work on things in a different way. Lean is really designed to focus on this system as a whole, and it's really focused on trying to encourage development in other areas as well. So think big, act fast, think big, act small, fail fast, and learn rapidly. And those are the main things that you need to bear in mind anytime that you're looking at Lean. Think about the bigger picture. How is what you're doing going to create this full thing that you're looking at? Not only within the bit of software, but within the organization as a whole. How are we eating elephants? One mouthful at a time. Anytime we're doing things, we want to make sure we're doing small actions. If you are worried about how something is going to go, try it anyway. The best way for you to learn is to fail at something and then try it again. And if you're doing that, then it means that you will be learning rapidly. You'll be using this idea of continuous improvement. So that's lean. Hopefully some of those things you found interesting as well, and it's things that you'll be able to put into practice in terms of Scrum and also in terms of some of the other agile type methods that you'll be using. I think we've got a couple more flavors that we're going to be looking at, so let's move on to the next video.